Welcome to the SDR DiscoCall podcast, a podcast designed for brand new sales development reps in the world of software as a service. Every Tuesday, we're going to be bringing you a new guest who's still in the role to share how or why they've gone into sales development. What have they learned in their SDR career and journey to date? And what 3 pieces of information would they like to share back to new and existing reps to help them become happy sellers? Every show is transcribed, recorded with links from the guests, which are available at happyselling.io/podcast. I'm going to be your host, Neil Buyan, and I look forward to taking you into the world of sales development through the SDR DiscoCall podcast. So with that in mind, let's begin. So hello listeners and watchers, welcome to another episode today. I'm really happy to have this guest on board. It's somebody that I was prospecting a few months ago, and they're based out in the US, and happy to say we had a great chat a few weeks back and they agreed to be on the show. So I'd like to introduce Miguel Diaz. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great, Neil. Thanks for having me today.
Thank you so much for joining. And I know it's super early on your side of the world, but for the listeners and watchers out there that do not know who you are today, Miguel, who are you? Where are you based in the world? And currently, what do you do? And who do you work for?
Yep. So my name is Miguel Diaz. I'm from California. I'm working at Crunchbase right now as an account representative, kind of our form of SDR2. But happy to be here today.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And again, for the listeners and watchers that are perhaps not familiar with Crunchbase, it's something, a tool and a solution and a business that I've been using for years. But what does Crunchbase do, and kind of what made you want to kind of hop on board with them?
Yeah, great question. So Crunchbase, if you're not familiar, it's a database for people to do research on private companies and the investors behind them. A lot of salespeople like to go to Crunchbase as well as investors.
Love it. Thank you so much. And yeah, I remember coming across Crunchbase many years ago when I was an SDR, and it would always give me that intel if, a company received funding, what they were going to use the funding for, if people approved of their CEO and leadership team, and kind of all the good, interesting stats way before we had a whole bunch of tools. But yeah, Crunchbase was one of my main resources. And when I saw that they had a sales development team, that's what drew me to your profile. I was like, aha, okay, so I'd like to know who this person is. But if we for the watchers out there, if you're not watching this episode, you can catch this on Happy Selling's YouTube channel, so just head over. But what we can also see is your LinkedIn profile, Miguel. So when I came across your LinkedIn, obviously I wanted to see kind of what was your background, what was your journey. And it was quite an interesting one that I hadn't come across before. But what we can see is obviously you had your area of studying, which was around sports management. You had a career within tennis and quite a sporty career at that, with some cool pieces. You went into logistics for a point. You ended up at Enterprise Rent-A-Car. You're a member of Rev Genius. And then obviously you came into Crunchbase back in September 2020. So for the listeners and watchers out there, Miguel, could you kind of walk us through your story of how did you go from studying sports management to, ending up as a sales development rep at Crunchbase?
Sure. Yeah, so graduated from University of Pacific in 2017 with a degree in sports management. But after I graduated, I guess it's important to say I played Division I tennis while I was there, and I was at a point where I felt confident enough that I wanted to play professionally after I graduated. So after I graduated, I did just that. Played for about a year. I was able to get a professional ranking. After I figured that I didn't want to, have a full-time travel and practice schedule, I didn't really want to go the route of working in a pro franchise like the Golden State Warriors or the Oakland A's or whichever. So that's how I found my career in sales ultimately. But, it was great because a lot of the attributes I learned as an athlete transferred over into sales, the discipline, the time management, the dedicated practice, all that kind of good stuff, translated really well into sales. So I was at Enterprise Rent-A-Car for a couple of years, and then after the pandemic, found myself at Crunchbase. But it was a blessing in disguise after the pandemic hit because, I have a really great team behind me at Crunchbase.
Definitely love that. So as I've said to guests in the past, that is a cool story, bro. And like when you said like being working as an athlete, and that helped give you a good grounding into things such as time management and discipline. What kind of things like were you going through as an athlete to instill these sort of values into you? Like what sort of training and what sort of exercises were you doing?
Yeah. Um, so it kind of started when I was at school. We had a very like regimented schedule where we'd wake up at 6 a.m. for weight training. Then I'd have classes in the middle of the day. Uh, then I'd have lunch. Then practice for 3 hours in the afternoon. Study hall for 2 hours after that. And then once I graduated and I had my own schedule to manage, and I didn't have a coach or an assistant coach behind me pushing me to do all this stuff. I had to be really
Mm,
regimented as well with the way that I structured my days and weeks. So what I would do is typically I would schedule one practice in the morning, either a practice with one of my friends or like, you know, a coaching lesson so I can make some extra money. Then a workout like mid morning, get some food in, and then potentially a second practice in the afternoon.
mhm.
But I was really detailed with the way I did it. So like I used to have a journal that I'd write all of the things that I wanted to accomplish in each of the tasks that I did. So I'd write all my workouts out, write all the drills that I want to do, that sort of thing. And now I
Mm,
do something a little bit similar with, being an SDR, structuring out my day, writing down like my highest priority tasks and kind of
mm.
going about it that way.
I love that. I absolutely love that. So early mornings, like with training, and obviously like going in for studying as well, doing extra pieces there. I love and heard that you were journaling things, also to like hit your goals and your accomplishments as well. And like you said, this kind of relates to structuring your day as an SDR. So what would you say to somebody that they're coming straight into this SDR role, and time management is a big piece that we've spoken about on the show before. But if you're feeling a bit lost or you don't really know where to start, what advice would you give that person to help kind of get their calendar under rein?
Some great advice that I got, or at least when I started, we had a calendar already pre-canned with like the tasks that you should be doing each day or each time.
Mm,
But for me, structuring my day really was around like when was uh, I guess how would I structure it best to fit my needs? So I typically I work really well in the morning, so I do a lot of my more difficult tasks, cold calling, emailing, prospecting in the
mm,
morning, and then afternoons would be more admin type of work. But I'd say for general advice, just figure out like when you operate the best and structure your schedule around that. And then if you have, important things that you want to get done, really actually block out time in your calendar to do that. Because
mm.
if you don't and you kind of flip between each task, you're not going to get anything done.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I love that, like you're figuring out like your optimum time that suits you best. Like when some people are morning people, some people are like afternoon, some people are also night owls. And trying to, like what you're saying, you're most productive in getting the hard stuff out of the way. And I think Brian Tracy, who's like an old school sales trainer, he has this saying of like, eat your frogs. Those are the first things that you want to do in the morning and get out of the way so that you can enjoy the rest of the day with other tasks as well. And somebody who's had like an athletic career, like working out in the morning, does that help with your productivity? And like how does like doing early stuff in the morning like help you set you up for your day, Miguel?
Um, so I'd say doing stuff in the morning. Like I guess I could just walk you through how I like to structure my day.
Please
So
do.
just like today, I typically start around 7 a.m. We're doing more of a hybrid type of role now at Crunchbase, where I'm doing both half outbound, half inbound. So typically, I'd structure it at 7 a.m. to 8, about 7 a.m. to like 8 or 9 a.m. would be
Mhm,
just a big call block. So 7 to 8 would typically be like my Europe and like East Coast call block, and then 8 to
mhm,
9 would be West Coast or just U.S. in general because it's more convenient of a time. Um, and sets the tone for the day if you're able to book some meetings right in the morning, right? So then
mhm,
that's probably why I do that. And then after that, I do most of my admin work or if I have any meetings already pre-set up for the week, then I kind of just work that into my early mornings. And
I
then
love that.
yeah,
So, and that was another interesting piece. So if I heard right, you're calling in like into the East Coast, but you're also calling into Europe. Is that right?
yep.
And what's that experience like talking to a European audience and then like talking to a North American audience? Like, what differences and things have you picked up working in those two different regions?
Um, I guess there's not really a ton of difference. Uh, so once you open up the call, you'll kind of get a sense of how the call is going to go after how they greet you. So
Mm.
if they're like, "Who is this?" right away, it's going to be more of an uphill battle. Whereas if they're like, "How are you doing?" They
Hmm.
ask me back,
Yeah.
then it's different. But yeah, I wouldn't say there's anything generally different. I would say that like if you're calling people in the afternoon, they may or may not be in a good mood, depending on like the time of the week. But I would say like the most success I've ever had was always calling on like Tuesdays or Thursdays for some reason. I'm not sure like
Mhm.
any reasons why, but maybe they're just better mood that day. So like I used to call on Mondays, like start my days off 7 a.m. Start calling them,
Yeah.
and then like that never worked out. So now I just do a lot more admin work on Mondays. You focus on more of my inbound calls, but yeah, no like crazy different like things from people in Europe to people in the U.S. Just different accents for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And that's an interesting piece here because I think with a lot of SDRs, we're always trying to find that optimal time to call. And as you say, you've kind of like figured out that Tuesdays and Thursdays fit you best in order to connect with your prospects. And I think that's an interesting point here because a lot of the time I've had SDRs that have said they've tried to call on a Monday and it hasn't been successful. And equally myself, I tend not to take calls or meetings, but I now do podcast recording on Mondays because I've got a lot of stuff. I've come back from my weekend. I'm catching up with emails and work and trying to figure out, okay, how am I going to strategize my work? And I'm not really into the rhythm of work yet because it's still in catch up mode. And it's normally by the Tuesday that, I'm a bit more relaxed. I know what's coming up. So I'm more open to taking a meeting and a call. And I think equally on a Thursday, perhaps why it's working better for you is because Friday, that's when people are like starting to switch off and get ready for another weekend. But what I have found is Friday mornings or perhaps Friday late afternoons, that's when you can get through to most decision makers
Yeah.
because the gatekeepers or other people have either gone home and they may take that call. Like there are a lot of people that will catch me on my mobile towards the end of the night because I'm like, it's probably somebody else, somebody catching up from work. And then I find out, hey, somebody's prospecting me. And I actually will actually want to listen to it to see how they go into it. So, yeah, it's finding that rhythm as well. So the other piece I wanted to know is, so as you said, like last year, like the pandemic hit, so you've obviously had this sport and career, you've looked into other fields and you came across enterprise rent-a-car. What was the story there? Like what kind of got you in with there and kind of how did that pan out?
Um, so I found enterprise rent. I was just after I finished my tennis career, I was kind of just finding any sales job. But what I really looked for was something that had a pretty like competitive environment, so I can still maintain that competitiveness that I had when I was playing tennis,
Mm,
as well as like a solid training program. So something that Enterprise is really well known for is their management trainee program, kind of getting you ready for uh, running your own branch location. And pretty much it did just that. Taught
mm,
me a lot of like the ins and outs for sales, customer service, management, people management, and then just general knowledge about how to run a business. So uh, a lot of it was like trying to increase your revenue while also driving down your expenses, things that you can
mm,
control. But the way I came about it, I just did the normal stuff. Went on LinkedIn, went on Indeed, went on all of the different job posting websites. Tried to find a place that had a decent enough like starting salary, but like room for you to grow within the position.
mm.
So that's kind of how I found myself there. Um, when I was there for about a little over 2 years, but I had a lot of jumps while I was there. So
Mhm.
I started off as a management trainee, just like everyone else in the program, and then after about 6 or 7 months, I passed. There's like a qualification interview where you have to meet with, 3 or 4 of the area managers in your region and pass, all of the questioning that they have about all of the different types or parts of the business. From there, you can start getting promoted into new positions, start taking on a management position at a branch location. And about a week later, I became an assistant manager at one of the local branches in my area.
Yeah.
I was promoted 3 times in a year. So each time going into like a larger branch location, consistently a top performer, like as a entry level and through my management career, because you're still measured on a matrix every month, just
Mm.
a different matrix for who you're competing with. And after about a year and some change, I became a branch manager,
Nice.
which, I was really fast,
Mm.
and that's what a lot of like my colleagues would say about my career at Enterprise. Like I just kept getting promoted.
Yeah.
Um, but then pandemic hit, travel industry was hit really, really hard. So a lot of the
Yeah.
branches in my area closed down, and a lot of the employees were laid off. But blessing in disguise, because now 6 months after I was laid off, I was able to find a SDR role, and it fits my personality really well. And I love the flexibility of how everything with the job is.
I love that. So it sounds like when you was at Enterprise Rent a Car, like you went through a lot of like unique skills, like you said, learning to run your own franchise, like the commercial side of it, how to structure it out. You were also promoted quite quickly as he was going through there, like literally racing through, excuse the pun. And like I think with all those little pieces, like these are the interpersonal skills that we can take into other SDR roles and help us out when we're going there. And I was just curious to know, like, now that you've gone into this SDR role, what with those skills, how have they helped you to become like a better SDR, and like in terms of when you're looking to grow and keep moving through the ranks at Crunchbase?
So I would say that like some of the things that I took from Enterprise to my career at Crunchbase um, was the idea of like mentorship. So when I was at Enterprise, I did a lot to help the employees that were under me, as well as the employees that were also in my area, to help level up their game. Because if our
Mm,
area is doing well, then you know it looks good on everybody, right? And
mm,
it's a very team effort. Similar to Crunchbase, I leaned a lot on my SDR manager and my team lead to help get me to where I am today, along with like just general research on LinkedIn and just following a lot of sales leaders and listening to podcasts like yours, um, and then sharing whatever I learn with my peers. But I'd say also just some things that I really took from my career at Enterprise was just understanding the importance of like the little things in a group setting. So
mm.
being the one to participate in uh, you know team meetings, with our CRO and like our all the AEs as well, and how like everything matters when you do participate and try to add value.
Mhm.
Because I think that was one thing that kind of set me apart. So when I started, I made it a point to always like put in my 2 cents, as long as it added a little bit of value to what we were talking about.
Yeah.
Um, and it just kind of builds your personal brand within an organization. That's something that like was really big when I was working at Enterprise, because it's a 10,000 employee place. And
Yeah.
when we'd have these huge like uh, regional trainings with 50, 60 people, our senior managers that would manage you directly would make sure that you're like you're dressed on point, you are participating in all of the the meetings that you're in, so that like if you were ever to try to apply for a position outside of your area, and
Yeah.
say like the hiring person, the area manager there, they've seen you how you act and like some of your thoughts in meetings, then they'll be more willing to hire you, because they know like what you're all about, rather than
Mhm.
if you're quiet, you're silent killer, you try to let your numbers just speak for themselves. It's great, it'll
Mm.
get you to the door, but then they don't really know your personality.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that so again, like the skill sets that you learn at Enterprise that are now relatable into Crunchbase, and as you say, like the way that you present yourself, the way that you see things as a team effort, leaning on your SDR manager, your team lead to help you out. And then with the other pieces of, your personal branding internally, that's not something that I've really spoken about much with guests. So like with personal branding, I love it, like where you said, where you're trying to give your 2 cents into every meeting. Again, you may be a numbers person where you let the numbers and the work do the talking for you, but that's an interesting piece that unless you're, speaking up a bit in team discussions, etc., then you may not get noticed as well. So what would you say to somebody like, they've just started out this job, it's their first tech job, they're a bit worried that what may come out of their mouth might not be the right thing, or they're embarrassed, or they're too, scared to give their 2 cents. What advice would you give them, Miguel?
Mm. I'd say if like the place that you're working at is in an environment that is like welcoming to you talking, even if you're like the most junior person there, that's something should be concerning, especially like I would say my advice would just be to not really like think about what other people think about you, because you're gonna be more comfortable after participating, and it's just gonna keep getting harder if you just kind of stay in the position and you don't speak up, and then 3-4 months now down the road, now it's like you can't speak up because you've never done it before. It's gonna be even more uncomfortable. So it's kind of like cold calling, it's really uncomfortable the first time you cold call, especially if you don't even understand what you're selling.
Yeah.
But after 100 calls, you're going to be much more confident. And I think that like same thing goes with just participating in meetings or just having that confidence to put your 2 cents in. So you have to, your self-worth's not tied to what you say, right? And they're people too.
Yeah, 100%. And I think there's always that initial fear of, like you say, going on a call or like speaking up within a meeting. But the more you do it, the more you push yourself just that little bit more, the more comfortable you become with it. I think last Friday, I joined like a sales leadership Zoom meeting that was based with sales leaders all over the world. And to be honest, I don't normally join these things because I'm more interested in SDR events. And I'm not focused on the AE or closing piece where a lot of these sales leadership events are focused on. And there was about 30 people in the room from the States, from the US, from Europe, from all over the world. And I felt really scared to speak up. And the topic they were talking about was how do we get salespeople to be more customer centric and stop like focusing so much on closing the deal and trying to make like shit tons of money, etc. And everybody was like giving their 2 cents. And every time I just kept hearing something, I was like, you're moving away from the core piece, because they were looking at comp plans. They were looking at sales leadership as to what the message they should be saying and all of this. And I sat there and I got really annoyed a little bit. So towards the end of the meeting, I just spoke up and I said, well, if you want to do an initiative to figure out, okay, how can we get salespeople to stop focusing on just, the closing element? Why don't we just speak to them? Why don't we do a survey? Why don't we, kick off a meeting with them, do an introductory call to figure out this is kind of what we want to do to help salespeople, but we'd love to get your input on it. And everybody went silent in the room and they looked at me. I was like, And after the meeting, people were saying, yeah, we really believe in that. We like that. And then I had people messaging me on LinkedIn saying, Neil, it was really great to get your input. We'd love to see you at the next event. And I was like, oh, really? And it's that fear of like speaking up, because, I may talk a load of rubbish or trash that comes out of my mouth. But again, just getting your 2 cents heard and just pushing yourself when you're feeling a bit feared, nothing wrong with it. And, it could actually go the other way and be a good thing, right? But obviously for yourself, like coming from a different industry and then going into tech sales, that must have been a change as well. What was your like onboarding experience, and what was your introduction to like tech when you came into Crunchbase, Miguel?
Yeah, great question. I actually had a really great onboarding experience. So I'm the first hire that's fully remote because of the pandemic. So I actually haven't met anyone on my team just yet.
All right.
But when I started, even before, like after I had signed my paper, I got, emails to my personal email from like people on the team just saying congrats on the new role, excited to have me. My first 2 months, I was ramping. First month was just like learning all of the different applications that we use, like our tech stack, Salesforce, all of the, that good stuff.
Yeah.
And then also just learning more about the product, how to pitch it properly. My second month, then that was more like me cold calling, kind of getting into the mix. But our enablement manager, she had a really good course for brand new SDRs, completely new to the SDR role, and then I just did all the modules within WorkRamp. A lot of it contained like me having to record myself doing pitches to different scenarios, which was pretty helpful. I'm the type of person that likes to be a little more comfortable before kind of jumping in and getting thrown into the wolves. So like I've seen other posts on LinkedIn where people are like, they should be cold calling 2-3 days after they start. And I'm like, nah, that totally would have been like the worst thing I could have done. But yeah, like how I started, and one really great piece of advice that I got was just to watch Gong calls every day. So just rewatch like top performers, how they pitched the products, the common objections, during, intro calls and discovery calls. That was super helpful. And that was, my first 2 months at Crunchbase, just listening to calls from all the other reps and then doing my WorkRamp modules. And then
I love it.
Aside from that, just like, practicing my pitch and all of the other stuff that was important.
I love it. So introduction to tech, you have your enable manager, you have like courses and modules to kind of get you up to speed. You're learning all about your tools. You're listening to calls on Gong as to how other reps are doing this role. And I really like that element of like recording yourself in certain scenarios, again, which was really helpful. If you don't mind me asking, what sort of scenarios were you challenging yourself to record against?
It would just be a lot of the common objections we would get. So like record yourself, like objection handling to someone saying that they use PitchBook, or asking about where we get our data from, things like that. Or, like why would you want to use our API versus like just the web platform, things like that. And then it was helpful because then I'd just be able to watch myself kind of stumble upon it. And then the more times that I'd practice it, if I had to re-record, it would just get a little bit easier each time. And that's probably what helped me the most, is just kind of getting comfortable with saying the words, even if I didn't even fully understand it.
Yeah. I love that, because I think when I'm training SDRs, and if we come into like objection handling or, how to respond to certain things that are discussed on a cold call or a discovery call, I actually, the analogy I use is like a tennis match, like the prospect will serve over perhaps the objection, and all we want to do as an SDR is just like hit that ball straight back. But I think you want to kind of think about the strategy as to how you're going to hit that, how you're going to serve it back to them. And you want to have a nice flow in a conversation. So it's not just like whacking it every time the objection hits us. It's skillfully like responding back. But perhaps if you watched like a video of you playing a tennis match to see, okay, where did you go wrong? And you know how to perfect it next time round. Again, it's coaching, it's consistency. So I really do like that idea of trying different scenarios, replaying back and hearing yourself, and then being able to confidently take on, the next serve to the prospect. So that's a really cool tip. Thank you for that, Miguel. And the other piece that I wanted to understand was, so when we met a few weeks back, your role said sales development rep at Crunchbase, and then it said account representative. And you advised at the beginning of the call that this is something that's like a new hybrid approach. Could you kind of walk us through, like, what does it mean to go from SDR and account representative, and kind of what you're testing out with Crunchbase at the moment?
Yeah, happy to talk about it. So, yeah, last time we talked, I was still an SDR, but our team is trying something out a little bit new, just kind of helping prepare us to get into that account executive role so that we have some closing experience before getting into a full closing role with a full closing quota. So I'm still doing a lot of the same things that a regular SDR would do, and I'd like to classify account rep almost as like SDR2. So I still have my same quota as an SDR, but I also have some goals for closing smaller tier deals. And the way that they're doing it for me is that it's kind of like a ladder approach. So each month I have a couple goals for closing smaller tier deals, because we have a self-serve model where
Mhm.
people can buy Crunchbase just directly from the website.
Yeah.
And my role is like, if there are teams that are smaller than 10, then I can try my hand at just demoing, following up to help them purchase online, but they purchase it essentially themselves. They don't have to go through like procurement or all that kind of good stuff. But
Mm.
I'm also just going to be learning more negotiation tactics, things that are going to help prepare me for that next step in my career, which ultimately I want to be an account executive and kind of come into that role. But
Mm.
really interesting how it panned out, because I didn't even know that I was even up for promotion or anything, and I was just
Mm.
hyper focused on just hitting my numbers and just being the best SDR I could be. And come beginning of Q2, because we do promotions about twice a year,
Got you.
they put me up for the promotion just because of my consistency hitting my KPIs, and they felt confident that I was able to kind of go into this role regardless of me being fairly new to the company.
Mm. I love that. And again, your personal branding, you're making a great impression. And again, congratulations on the promotion. And I really do like this idea of, like I've seen in other companies where they'll go an SDR, they become maybe an inside sales rep, or like you said, like an account representative, where you're not doing a full end to end on the enterprise deals, but you're able to work on some more smaller deals with a couple of users to go through the ropes and learning of, trying to win a deal, the commercials, the procurement, giving the demos. These are all great assets to then help you, step into that account exec role more successfully. Because I think what I've seen as a former SDR manager, a lot of the times reps will come in and saying, right, I want to do this SDR piece for maybe 6 to 8 months. Then I just want to go straight into the account exec role, or I've been here for 12 months. I'm
Hmm.
now ready to, be an AE. And I think the scariest thing that can happen, because it happened to me, was when you're given that full quota of an account exec, that's a hell of a lot of responsibility. And there are some things that you haven't learned. Because being an SDR, you're building relationships, you're booking your meetings, you're qualifying prospects, but it's those, how do you give a value-based demo rather than just showing the features and benefits of it? How do you speak to the procurement team to make sure that you're all checked out and you're compliant? And also stakeholder management, because sometimes we think we're speaking to the decision maker and they're going to sign off that contract, but then midway through the deal, they say, so we just kind of got to bypass this through our CFO and make sure they're okay with it. I was like, oh, do I have to sell to somebody else now? And it's all those little things that I messed up on because I didn't know, but having the ability to try it out. And if you've got great mentors and people that have done it, that will help you successfully go into that role. But with somebody of your caliber, that's, you've moved up through the ranks in certain positions before, are you putting yourself a timeline on this, or kind of like when do you foresee you taking onto that account exec role?
Um, I have a soft timeline for it. I don't want to if let's say if I don't get it in the amount of time that I allotted for it, because I think I gave myself till like Q1 next year. That was my goal. When I
Mm-hmm.
started, I was like, if I do everything right, things pan out, potentially be account executive by that time next year. If I don't,
Mm-hmm.
it's not going to be the end of the world, and I know the opportunity is still going to be there as long as I, just focus on what I could control. Um, but yeah, that would be, I guess, my soft timeline for it. Just because I love the SDR role. I think it's fun. Um,
Yeah.
the the nature of the job is pretty fun if you're seeing some success. So, and then especially with the account executive role, it's like the grass is greener sometimes on the other side, but you
Mm-hmm.
don't really know what you don't know. Like some of the stuff you were talking about, stakeholders, like later stage in the funnel is just different. It's just completely new to me. Whereas now it's just like straight up building relationships, trying to get attention, you
Yeah.
know, booking meetings, all that good stuff.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. And the like those pieces there, those are the things that I'm passionate about, because to your point, I had a hell of a lot of fun doing it. And I think when I went into the AU role, I lost elements of that part of being an SDR. And that's kind of why I got bored, because I found it very transactional. And I think the mindset that I used to have, which isn't the case now, was I thought, right, as long as I can demo and show all the great things that this platform can do, they're going to buy in. And what I realized in later life is, okay, so if you imagine the demo is here, everything outside of it is building a relationship. It's constantly selling, it's talking to different people, different departments to keep them like on a conveyor belt to becoming a recurring customer. So what I had to realize and zoom out for a minute is like maybe selling, or what I thought was selling, which is just doing demos, is probably what, 30 minutes, an hour at most of like a 12-month relationship with that customer. So I think the advice that I give to SERs and to yourself is, if there are any meetings like kickoff calls, renewal calls, or upsell calls, or perhaps doing technical demos, or joining like a procurement meeting or a commercial discussion, join in on those in the next few months and come to these meetings with notepads and pens, and like anything that doesn't make sense to you or you've never heard before, ask those questions to your enablement team, to your account executive, and that's what's going to build up your knowledge, so that when where you have the opportunity to try out these smaller deals, you can experiment by asking some certain questions in those sales cycles that you're going to be doing. And yeah, just have a hell of a lot of fun with it, because I think it's the whole thing of fail fast, make your mistakes as you can now, so that when you go into that role, which I feel confident that you'll be in there by Q1, if not earlier, next year, just have fun with it, dude. But I'm really looking forward to watching you grow and see how things pan out at Crunchbase. But as we're coming towards the end of the show, and you've been a great guest today, Miguel, what 3 bits of advice would you give to a younger version of yourself who's just about to embark on this sales development journey?
Yeah. Um, so bits of advice that I'd give, I would say, number one thing, practice your pitch and common objections like you would flashcards for school. So that's something that I also did when I was ramping. Just consistently practicing your pitch helps so much, especially when you get into a moment where like you're nervous, you feel a little tongue-tied. You can go back to that. Focusing on what you can control. I think I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but just kind of detaching from the outcome of all the tasks that you're doing. So when you're making a cold call, your self-worth isn't attached to booking that meeting, right? And just focus on like what you can control during that call. And third piece of advice, just be consistent with all the things that you do. So you don't want to spend 4 hours prospecting one day and then not prospect for 2 weeks. 30 minutes to an hour should be more than enough time, especially once you get comfortable with how to do it. As well as cold calling, all the good stuff, personalizing emails, video messaging. If you're consistent about it, you're going to consistently get better at it. It's going to become easier over time.
Couldn't agree more, sir. So I love that. So constantly practicing your pitch like a flashcard style to get, like what are we talking about? What are we trying to convey to people that we're speaking onto the phone? Letting go of the outcome. Like you said, your net worth isn't just based on you booking or not booking that meeting. It's just experience that cold call or that email. And, I think with SDRs, what I say is like, you don't have to be the best at all of those topics that an SDR does, but get the general grounding. And then to your last point, the way that we can become better is by being consistent and showing up on that. And I think that's a really good point, because I used to be a really bad SDR where I would do some outbound campaigns on LinkedIn. I'd book a ton of meetings, and then the following weeks I wouldn't do it. And then I'd find myself trying to find new avenues and trying other stuff out. And I was very sporadic and all over the place. But to your point, if you put it in your diary, commit to doing that, stick to it, see those results. And then, it's not about perfection, it's about progress. So I think those are some solid bits of advice, Miguel. Thank you. And do you have any shout outs that you'd like to give out on the show today?
Yeah, I would. So, shout outs to my mom, my family, my girlfriend for always supporting me, and then on my team at Crunchbase, Anthony and Will, and Natalie, and everyone on the sales team been, super helpful in getting me to where I am today, and I know that they're gonna always support me through the rest of my career.
Super sales salute to the family and crew and all the guys and girls out at Crunchbase. Thank you so much for Miguel. And Miguel, if there are any SDRs that are listening in and they perhaps want to connect with you, maybe they're interested to learn more about Crunchbase, or, maybe offer you a game of tennis if you're up for it, what's the best way to get in touch with you, sir?
Yeah, just send me a connection request. I pretty much accept everybody. And then if you hear me on the show, send me a personalized note. Just say you heard me on the Disco podcast, and you learned something from this. Hopefully, then I'll for sure accept.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. Well, Miguel, I wish you all the best success in the coming months. I'm looking forward to you actually meeting your team in reality and getting to check everybody out. And again, thank you for being such a great guest on the show. And all I can say is I wish you the best and happy selling, Miguel.
Thanks again, Neil. I really appreciate it.